The winning blueprint presents.
In the lab room.
Welcome back. Thank you for joining me again. You find yourself in the lab room. Once again, I am your host, Lou. Thank you for joining me on this rigorous two-a-day schedule that we're on for these lab reports. And the next team that is up is the Buffalo Bills. Now, the Buffalo Bills had an intriguing start to their season last year. They were 5-2 to begin the year before injuries decimated their frontline starters. And they went from 5-2 to about 7-9, 6-10 to finish up that season. So if they could have stayed healthy last year, who knows what they would have done in that AFC East. So let's talk about their strengths. And the first thing you think of with the Buffalo Bills was their running attack last year. Last year, Fred Jackson was a monster. Starting out the season, he was on an MVP-like beginning to his season. You could make an argument over the first 8 weeks of the season, Fred Jackson was the MVP of the league. I mean, every time you turned around, a game break was being shown. And it was Fred Jackson breaking off a long run or catching a little pass and doing the rest. They were an efficient offense early on in the beginning of the season, and a big part of that was Fred Jackson's emergence. He went down around week 10, and in stepped C.J. Spiller, the running back that the Bills invested a first-round pick in 2009, and he started to flash. He looked like the guy that they thought they were getting with that first-round pick, and they're excited about these two moving into 2012, so that is definitely a strength for the Bills. Also, a strength for the Bills was a weakness last year, and it's their defensive line. They brought in new defensive coordinator Dave Wanstead to shore up that defense, and he's switching the Bills from a 3-4 to a 4-3, which is his patented defense that he likes to coach. And the Bills went out and they spent money in the offseason. Let's hope, if you're a Bills fan, that that's money well spent. They went out and they got Mario Williams. They almost gave him $100 million. They went out and they acquired Mark Anderson from the Patriots, who was a pass rushing specialist. He had 10 sacks last year. You throw in the mix that Sean Merriman was there the year before and nursing injuries, as he's done over the last 3 years. They're hoping that he's finally healthy now. You couple that with the fact that they spent a first-round draft pick last year on the big tackle Marcel Darius, and also they had Kyle Williams already there, who was their best lineman for about 3-4 years there. So they're stacked along that defensive line. If they can get these guys to gel and be a cohesive unit and play together quickly, the Bills' defensive line can be one of the best in the league. Now you flip to the other side of the coin and you look at weaknesses. The Bills have an opening at their wide receiver position, their wide receiver position across from Stevie Johnson. And there's not a household name in sight. It's hard to get excited about a competition for an opening when the guys that you have competing for that position don't seem to be guys that you think are going to have a high ceiling. And they have a lot of guys that you've never heard of. I'm pretty sure you've never heard of Donald Jones. He started last year and you still don't know who he is. There's a reason, because he didn't do anything last year. That's why the spot is open again. They drafted a young guy in the third round out of NC State, T.J. Graham, who they like a lot. But again, he's a rookie, and you got to see what he can do. You're going to watch him in the preseason and see if that's somebody that can vie for that spot. They also have a guy that I actually like, Donald Derek Hagan, who's had a cup of tea around the league. He's had a few stops. This guy, I think, is ready, if given the chance, to be a productive receiver in this league. I actually like him to win the spot, but I'm not sure if he's going to get the nod or not. They're looking to give Donald Jones every opportunity to keep his job. But the Bills also have another receiver that's in the mix, Marcus Easley, who they like. He was there last year, but he had ailments that kept him from getting a chance. He's finally healthy. That's another guy that's in the mix. So you don't know who's going to win this second wide receiver battle, but it's hard to get excited if you're a Bills fan because they're telling you that these guys are talented, but you've never heard of them. You've never really seen them. So it's hard for you to say, hey, we got some talented guys here. Let's see if one of them can win the battle. But we'll see. It remains to be seen if one of these guys are going to step up and actually solidify themselves as the second wide receiver. Camp battles. As previously mentioned, the Bills have a vacancy at their second wide receiver position. We've just talked about it. It's about 4 guys vying for that second wide receiver spot. And the favorite right now is looking to be Donald Jones. He's probably going to win it. I like Derek Hagan myself. I really think that he deserves a shot. If he gets a chance, I think he can be a productive receiver in this league. TJ Graham is a speedster. He's a guy that ran track in college, and he's trying to prove to people that he's not a track guy playing football, but he's a football guy that happens to run track. So he'll be looking to prove himself in the National Football League. And then again, Marcus Easley, a guy that they brought in last year. They looked for big things from him. He had ailments off the field that he couldn't get back to. And he's going to be looking to be someone that Mike could step in. And his upside is supposedly good. So if he's someone that has that enormous upside that they've been mentioning, maybe Marcus Easley is someone that can step in and man up that second wide receiver spot. Also, the Bills have another intriguing position that a battle is taking place at, and that's at quarterback, backup quarterback. They brought in Vince Young in the offseason to challenge Tyler Thigpen at the backup spot behind Ryan Fitzpatrick. Tyler Thigpen is trash. I don't like him. I don't like his game. I don't think he's a viable backup in this league. I don't think you want Tyler Thigpen coming in for your team in relief and asking him to win 2 or 3 games. I don't even think he's good enough to do that. I think he's a guy that if you allow him to be your backup, he's stealing money. And so I think Vince Young, this is his job to lose. Chan Gailey, the head coach of the Bills, he loves athletic quarterbacks, guys that can move in and out of the pocket. That is why Tyler Thigpen is around. But Vince Young is an athletic quarterback in his own right, and I see Vince Young tightening up that second quarterback spot and Tyler Thigpen. The interesting thing about this battle, there is no third quarterback on the roster for the Bills this year. What they're going to do is Brad Smith, the free agent signing that they had last year, is going to double as their third quarterback, their emergency quarterback. So whoever loses this battle between Tyler Thigpen and Vince Young, they're back on the streets. So it's really a battle worth watching because whoever loses this battle no longer has a job in the National Football League. Also, there's a battle for nickel corner out in Buffalo. And there's really what I like to call a young man movement out in Buffalo, especially at the corner position. Last year, they drafted Aaron Williams in the second round out of Texas. He's playing one corner position. This year, their first round selection, Stephon Gilmore out of South Carolina. He's going to be their other corner starting out the season. They want something desperately out of Leotis McKelvin. They drafted him in the first round about 4 years ago, and they've really been disappointed with the production that they've got out of him to this point. This is his last year on his rookie deal. If he doesn't perform, he can not only find himself off of the Bills roster, he could find himself out of the league. This is a big year for Leotis McKelvin, and I fully expect him to win that third nickel corner spot. that young man movement that the Bills are having at their corner position really spells the end for one of the corners that they've had on their roster for about 10 years. And he's been a very good corner in this league, and that's Terrence McGee. He's in his 10th year, and I really feel like they're trying to phase him out. They got a couple of guys on that roster who are young, who are hungry, who they feel like can serve a purpose on the field, and they're really trying to phase out a lot of these old veterans. And I think Terrence McGee, his spot could be in danger. He started off camp injured, and he hasn't been able to get back. And so he even knows it himself. He's already come out and said that he feels like his job could be in jeopardy if he can't get back on the field and produce in camp to hold off some of these young guys. So hopefully Terrence McGee can get back out there, because he's been a Bill for a while, and he's been a productive player for the Buffalo Bills. Another positional battle is that of right guard for the Buffalo Bills. They had their starter Keith Urbick last year go down with an injury, and in Urbick's absence, Chad Reinhardt stepped in, and he did a wonderful job for them, so much so that now there's a battle for that position. Urbick is back, and he's looking to reclaim his position, but he's going to have to earn it in camp. So only time will tell who will take that battle, but the preseason is always an indicator of who the Bills or who that team likes. So watching these preseason games and seeing who's running with the first team will tell you all you need to know in a lot of instances. Rookie watch. The Bills spent their first-round pick on Stephon Gilmore, the cornerback out of South Carolina. They absolutely love this guy. They think that they have the next shutdown corner in the league. They've already made comparisons to Darrelle Revis because he's a big guy. He's physical at the line of scrimmage, and they really love his athleticism, his ability to make plays. Watch out for Stephon Gilmore, the first-round pick for the Buffalo Bills. They love him a lot, and they think that you will too. The second-round selection that the Bills made was a surprise to them, because this was a need that they had that people thought they would fill in the first round, but they went and he was still there in the second round. They thought that he was going to come off the board late in the first round, and that's the tackle Cody Glenn out of Georgia. They got Cody Glenn, and they were ecstatic to get him because they didn't think he would be there. Cody Glenn was there on the board. They took him. They wanted to plug him in at the right tackle position, but they've had an incumbent starter there, Chris Hairston, who they like a lot, but they think that he's reached his maximum potential in that offense. And they feel like Cody Glenn could come in and step his game up to the level that the rest of the offense is performing at. So it's going to be interesting in camp, in the preseason, to see who's running with the first team and who's progressing in camp and who they like the most, because even if Cody Glenn doesn't win the initial battle, don't be surprised if at some point during the season he's the starter at right tackle. And even if this whole season goes by and he doesn't start, he could be the starter next year. They like him a lot, and they're looking to use him here in the near future. The Bills' third-round selection we've already touched on, T.J. Graham, receiver out of NC State. He's a fast receiver that can get down the field in a hurry. I think he's going to play this year, whether it's at that second wide receiver position in the slot. You're going to see T.J. Graham at some point during the season, and his speed is something that you can't ignore. He's going to get behind corners and safeties and wreak havoc in secondaries if he can pick up the playbook and if he can stay healthy. He's a small guy with a slim frame that might get banged around in the NFL. Again, he's trying to prove to people that he's not a track guy that plays football, but a guy that is a football player who happened to run track. So we'll keep an eye on him and see how he progresses as the season goes along. The Bills used their fourth-round pick, and they had two of them, one on an outside linebacker from Florida State, Nigel Bradham, and the other on a cornerback from LSU, Ron Brooks. These two guys are going to be core special teamers right off the bat. Will they contribute on defense? That's another question. I don't think that these guys will be able to crack the lineup this year, but if they progress and they're able to show them in practice that they're ready for a little bit of playing time, maybe you could see these guys this year. But I find that highly unlikely to happen. All right, so that's the rookie watch for the Bills. We're going to move into the experiment. And this experiment is called Bills. We kept it nice and simple. And really what the Bills are looking to do in 2012 is build off of the season that they had last year, or at least the start of the 2011 season that they had. They were rolling. They had defeated the Patriots. They felt like they were the team to beat in the AFC East at the beginning of the season. And they're looking to build some momentum off of that start they had in 2011. So let's get into the research question, which is, was last year's start something the Bills can build on? Or are the Bills still at the bottom of the barrel in the AFC East? That's the question you have to ask if you are a fan of the Bills. Can we build off of what we did in 2011? Or are we still the same team year in, year out that are bottom feeders in the AFC East? Again, injuries and things that they couldn't control beset them last year. But if they can stay healthy and get something out of these guys that they just signed, who knows what the Bills can do in 2012. Hypothesis. If the Bills' money in the offseason was well spent and Fred Jackson and Ryan Fitzpatrick are the real deal, then the Bills can begin to rise in the AFC East. That's really the big question for the Bills this year. Can they stay healthy? Can Fred Jackson and Ryan Fitzpatrick live up to their deals? Jackson just got paid. Fitzpatrick just got paid a year ago. And all the money that they spent in the offseason on all these linemen, can these guys come in and produce? Time will tell again. We will see, though. Materials needed for the Bills to go where they want to go in 2012. Fitzpatrick, for real. He has to be the quarterback that they spent that money on last year. They gave him a nice size contract. They gave him starting quarterback money. Now he has to perform up to that deal. He was dealing with injuries last year. Before the injuries started to take effect, he had a passer rating up over 90. He had 14 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. So he had a 2-to-1 ratio for touchdowns to interceptions. So he was on pace to have about 28 touchdowns and 14 interceptions, and the Bills will take that in a heartbeat. If he can play at that kind of level, the Bills will definitely be in the hunt in the AFC East. Fred X delivers. The Bills need Fred Jackson to play at that level that he was at before he injured himself last year and broke his collarbone. Fred Jackson was among the lead leaders in total yards gained from scrimmage last year before he hurt himself. He was on a torrid pace. Fred Jackson was an elite back for the first 10 games of the season last year, and the Bills need him to be that way again in 2012. He'll be splitting carries with C.J. Spiller this year, but they still need him to be dynamic in those carries and catches that he gets. They still need him to produce when he does get the ball in his hands. The Bills need Spiller to be a thriller. C.J. Spiller came in Fred Jackson's absence last year, and he produced like the back the Bills thought they were getting when they drafted him with the number 10 overall pick in the 2009 NFL Draft. They like his upside. They think that he can be a home run hitter in this offense, and they need him to step up this year to augment that Bills passing game. Money well spent on the defense. The Bills have poured a lot of money into this defense, and rightfully so. The defense struggled last year mightily. Even when the offense was playing good football, the defense was still struggling. They need the defense to step up. They need the defensive line to be the anchor of that defense, and that's where they poured a lot of that money into. So they're looking for dividends to be paid on that money that they spent on these guys in the offseason. Young corners have to skip class. They cannot afford to be getting schooled out on the field and learning on the fly. These young corners have to come in and play some top-notch football for the Bills. They cannot afford to be getting schooled by these veteran receivers and struggling to come along because the Bills really don't have any depth behind them to replace them. These guys have to step up, and the Bills are investing a lot of trust in these guys. They're telling these young guys, you are our future. You are what we're putting out on the field at corner. Go make plays for us. So these young corners have to skip class. And the second receiver is, we don't know. That's a question that the Bills have to answer, and they're hoping to answer it in an emphatic way because the Bills have Stevie Johnson out there, and he has emerged as a solid receiver in this league. He's had times where he's had lapses of concentration. That Pittsburgh game in overtime when he dropped that game-winning touchdown. He's had lapses in concentration. But when he's on, he's a dangerous receiver, but there's no complement there. He needs someone across the field to take some of that pressure off of him. Teams know going into the game, we need to slow Stevie Johnson down. There's no one to take that pressure off of him. Someone has to step up at that second receiver spot, take the pressure off of Stevie Johnson. All right, so let's go into the data. The hard numbers that the Bills need to contend in the AFC East. Ryan Fitzpatrick needs to throw for about 4,050 passing yards, 28 to 25 touchdowns, 14 to 16 interceptions, and about a 63% passing complete percentage. All right. Stevie Johnson is looking to have 75 to 83 grabs for about 1,100 receiving yards and 8 to 10 touchdowns. That's very doable for him. He's never hit 1,100 yards receiving before, but I think he can do it. The Bills need him to step up and be big in their offense in order for them to be successful. David Nelson. This is a big slot receiver that the Bills like to throw to in the red zone. He's 6'5". He's a long-rangey guy. He has a big catch radius, so the Bills like to go to him, and they're going to go to David Nelson a lot this year. I'm looking for 61 to 68 catches for David Nelson for about 750 receiving yards and 5 to 7 touchdowns. Fred Jackson is next up, and he has to be big for the Bills this year. He started out big last year. They need him to continue where he left off last year before he broke the collarbone. 200 to 225 carries. Again, he's split with C.J. Spiller. 985 to 1,080 yards rushing for 11 total TDs. All right. C.J. Spiller is another guy that has to step up. The Bills are going to put more on his plate this year. He needs to step up and show them that he can handle an increased workload. Okay. 125 to 150 carries for C.J. Spiller for 650 to 825 rushing yards. See that big gap between 650 to 825? If he's that home run threat that they think he can be, he can hit that 825-yard rushing mark that I've set for him. 7 total TDs. The Bills' D has to be better in 2012. The offense was extremely explosive early on in the season last year, but the defense let them down time and time again. The Bills were in shootouts last year, and they happened to win a lot of them early on. The Raiders game, both teams were in the 30s. The Patriots game, both teams in the 30s. The Bills were fortunate to outscore teams last year early in the season. When those injuries took effect and those key players went down, they were no longer able to keep pace with the elite offenses in the league because the defense couldn't stop anybody. That defense has to be better this year. So they're looking for the Bills to force 30 to 34 turnovers. With the new defensive line, you're thinking there's going to be an increase in sacks with Mario Williams, a guy that can get you 15 sacks a year. Mark Anderson, a guy that's been a double-digit sack guy in this league. You're looking for 36 to 41 sacks. The Bills can give up 20 points a game, and that's what I have them down for. 20 points a game if that offense is scoring points. And I don't see why they can't score points because they have all the pieces from last year coming back. If they can perform at the level that they did last year, they can score points. The defense can give up 20 a game and still be fine. You can't give up 23, 25 points like they were last year and consistently and think you're going to win. Plays of over 40, the Bills gave up 11 last year. They can't afford to give up that many this year. That needs to be scaled back. Around 8 is where they should be. If you give up 8 plays of over 40 yards, you should be fine if you're the Bills because that offense can score points. Independent variable. The Bills were decimated by injuries last year. We've talked about it already. We've touched on that. If they can stay healthy, they can be a team to be reckoned with. But not only do they need to stay healthy, the Bills are a team that can get teams to turn over the football. They're a very opportunistic team. But they didn't get sacks last year. They made plays off of their own just being in the right spot. These plays weren't made because guys were getting pressure on a quarterback and forcing errant throws. These guys were in the right positions, balls were being tipped, and they were making plays. They have to get more sacks. The Bills were 27th in the league with 19 sacks last year. That's not going to get it done. That's why they went out and spent that money on the defensive line to generate more pressure, to force more turnovers. If the Bills can stay healthy and generate more sacks, that leads us to our dependent variable, then the Bills will be able to force more errant throws from opposing quarterbacks, get more pressure, force more turnovers, get that ball back into the hands of Fitzpatrick, Jackson, and company to score more points. All right. The constant. When you're talking about Buffalo, it's extremely windy in Ralph Wilson Stadium. It was hard for me to even think of that constant. That's how inconsistent the Bills have been on the football field. It's windy in Buffalo. That's the best I could come up with. Conclusion. The 2012 Buffalo Bills are a team that can win if everything comes together. All right. They're going to be defined by their defense because their offense has established themselves as a team that, if healthy and clicking on all cylinders, can play with just about any team in the league. They can score with the best of them. They're going to be defined by Dave Wanstead, the new defensive coordinator, and that defense and what they're able to do on the field. If they can be dominant on defense and stifle inept offenses, the teams that come into town who can't really score, if they can smother those teams, hold them to 6 or 13 points, and slow down the teams like the Patriots, and stop them from scoring 27 and 31 points and hold them to 20, the Bills will have a shot to make noise in the AFC East this year. If you're a Bills fan and you've been waiting for the Bills to make the playoffs, I'm here to tell you, start rooting for the 2013 Buffalo Bills because you're not going to the playoffs this year either. You're going to be 8-8. You're going to try to start to build on that. And don't get mad. You were 6-10 last year. You're taking a step up. You're 8-8 now. And you're starting to show teams that you're not afraid of them and that you're ready to compete. If this defense can get stronger and have a year under their belt, maybe in 2013, you'll be a team to be reckoned with. And that's going to wrap it up for the Bills. After this lab quiz, we'll be back, and then we'll start on the Hard Knocks featured Miami Dolphins.
Lab quiz. Lab quiz.
And we're back. And we're back with the Miami Dolphins and their lab report. Now, the Miami Dolphins are a team that they've got a lot going on right now. They're a team in serious reconstruction mode. What happens when you have a new head coach and he comes in and he wants to bring in his guys, his system, do things his way? A lot of the guys that were there from the previous regime, they don't really fit into what's going on with the new coaching staff. And I think that's where the Dolphins are right now. The strength of the Dolphins is going to be their defensive line. And their new head coach, Joe Philbin, is more of a speed, tempo, finesse type of coach in the sense that he likes his guys to be athletic, to be faster than the old regime, which they predicated themselves on being a smash mouth, grinded out type of football team. So their coaches were more defensive minded. Philbin is looking to come in and he wants to score points. He wants to score points and allow the defense to be in attack mode. And that defensive line is one that is very quietly one of the better defensive lines in the league, and you don't hear a lot about them because they play on the Miami Dolphins. Paul Soliai might be a top 5 defensive tackle in this league. His partner in crime, Randy Starks, made it to the Pro Bowl last year. He had 2 interceptions from the defensive tackle spot last year. He had 6.5 sacks. He was playing great football last year. You look at Cameron Wake. He made the Pro Bowl in 2010 with 14.5 sacks. The 2 guys I just mentioned, Paul Soliai and Randy Starks, both made the Pro Bowl in 2011. Jared Odrick, a guy that they drafted out of Penn State last year, he was a rookie. He saw limited snaps, but yet he still had 6.5 sacks. So he can get after the quarterback. And those are the 4 guys that are going to start for the Dolphins. Look for the Dolphins' defensive line to be the strength of this team. And hopefully they can carry that Dolphins defense. Also, a strength of the Dolphins. And you can laugh all you want, but their punter, Brandon Fields, is a strength. And a lot of people, punter, yeah. You don't realize that your punter is a problem until your punter is a problem. When you have a good punter, it's easy for you to take him for granted because he's getting the ball inside the 10, inside the 20 continuously. There's nothing worse than you having a drive stall out at the 43-yard line, which is right outside of field goal range, and you have to punt, and your punter booms the ball into the end zone, and they get it at the 20. There's nothing worse than that. It's great to have a punter that can place the ball at the 3-yard line when you had to punt from your own from the other team's 43. It's great to have a guy who can flip field position when you have a 3 and out and have to punt from your own 23-yard line, and he can put together a 55-yard punt and flip the field position. Punters don't get enough credit when they're good, and they get too much blame when they're bad. Brandon Fields is a strength for the Miami Dolphins. Weaknesses. If the right guard position and what they're doing is any indication on how they're planning to approach this season, then the right guard position is going to continue to be a weakness for the Miami Dolphins. They have put in journeyman Artis Hicks as their starting right guard. They went out and signed Eric Steinbach as an insurance policy in case Hicks is what he's been throughout his whole career, inconsistent, which he's going to be. Again, another guy that the Redskins had on their roster who didn't do a lot. So I can tell you firsthand, Artis Hicks is inconsistent. Eric Steinbach didn't play football in 2011. He was recovering from a back surgery. So he's a guy who's rusty, but before the injury, he was a guy that you could count on for 16 quality starts. I'm thinking he's going to end up starting at that right guard position. But you don't know if you're getting the before the surgery Eric Steinbach or you're getting post-surgery Eric Steinbach. Either way, that right guard position has been a mess, is going to continue to be a mess until they handle that position with a long-term solution. Right now, they keep trying to put Band-Aids on it. That's not a good look for the Miami Dolphins in 2012. The biggest concern for the Dolphins, though, their biggest weakness, is that they don't force turnovers. This is a good defense that plays sound, quality football on the defensive end, but they don't force turnovers. They stop teams from scoring points, but they don't force turnovers. The Dolphins had a whopping 19 turnovers last year that they forced. 19 turnovers was good for 22nd in the league last year. They have to be better than that. That was a porous Miami Dolphins defense in terms of turning teams over. They have to be better at getting turnovers. They only recovered 3 fumbles last year. That was worst in the National Football League. They have to be a better team at forcing turnovers and getting people to turn the football over and getting short fields for their offense. Let's go on to camp battles. And the Dolphins probably have arguably the most important camp battle in all of the National Football League, and that's their starting quarterback position. What makes their starting quarterback battle unique from the rest of the teams in the league is that they actually have guys who can play the quarterback position in the National Football League. They have quality guys who can start for NFL teams vying for that starting spot, whereas in Arizona and in Tennessee, you don't know what that other guy is going to bring to the table. In this instance, they have 2 guys that if they start, they could produce in this league and have proven that they can produce in this league. Right now, the Dolphins have come out and said that David Garrard is going to be the starter for their first preseason game. Now, I was actually a little disappointed with that decision because I'm actually a Matt Moore fan. He has gained my trust because I thought that he was one of these guys that was going to steal money from teams and not be a viable quarterback, not even a good backup in this league. He's not a money stealer. This guy came in last year, played some quality football for the Dolphins for a team that didn't have a lot of talent. He's won a lot of that locker room over, and it was disappointing to see that Garrard got the nod early on. But what you have to keep in mind is that this new coaching staff has no ties to Matt Moore. They didn't bring him in. This new staff brought David Garrard in. So they're going to want to give their guy a shot to win the job. And so Garrard is getting the first crack at winning this starting job. This doesn't mean that the job is closed and it's the Garrard's job to lose. What it signifies, though, is that he's the leader in the camp house and that Matt Moore is going to have to overtake him to win the job. And I thought it should have been the other way around with what Matt Moore did last year. However, there is a third participant in this quarterback race. However, he has to come way off of the pace, and that's rookie first-round selection Ryan Tannehill out of Texas A&M. He got to camp late. He had a contract dispute. He's really not missing anything because unlike the other 2 quarterbacks, the offensive coordinator that they brought in, Mike Sherman, was his college head coach last year, so he knows the playbook. He didn't miss anything because he knows exactly what he needs to do and what that playbook entails. So he's not like your average run-of-the-mill rookie quarterback who's like a deer caught in headlights. He knows what's going on. He knows the playbook. The only thing that he has to adjust to is the terminology that they might input into that playbook in the NFL and the speed of the game. But he's still behind 2 veteran quarterbacks that can get it done in the league, so I don't see him starting to start out the season. Now, if the Dolphins end up playing some sub-500 football and later on in the season have no shot at making the playoffs, I could honestly see Tannehill getting on the field because he is the future of the Miami Dolphins. They invested a lot in him, and they expect him to be the quarterback of the future. So if the Dolphins are not in the playoff race come December, look for Tannehill to start to get some starts and get his feet wet. Another camp battle is that of the right guard. We already spoke about it. Artis Hicks, Eric Steinbach. That position is a mess. Artis Hicks is not going to solve your problems at right guard. So I think the Dolphins need to roll the dice and just put Eric Steinbach in and see what he has left in the tank because Artis Hicks is as inconsistent as you get at a right guard. He's a backup at best, and he's no one's starter. And so I think the Dolphins are going to find that out in the preseason, pull the plug on that experiment, and stick Eric Steinbach in there to start week 1. The Dolphins also have a strong safety battle, and they have guys that were in there last year, and they all kind of did an adequate job at being a strong safety. No one stepped up and commanded control of that position. I don't really see this as being a battle that is going to garner that much attention. Whoever gets it, they get the job. I'm not overly impressed with any of the guys that they have in Chris Clemens, Tyrone Culver, and Jimmy Wilson. Jimmy Wilson started more games than those other two last year, and I think he'll end up being a starting strong safety for the 2012 season. The third running back position is interesting in the sense that the Dolphins spent their fourth-round pick on Lamar Miller, running back out of Miami. And he's coming in, and I thought he would be perfect for Joe Philbin's one-cut system. But he struggled in camp. And the Dolphins also have Steve Slayton on their roster. And they like what Slayton's been doing in camp. If you remember when the Texans drafted Steve Slayton in 2008, he went over 1,000 yards. The next season, he couldn't hold on to the football. He fumbled about 8 or 9 times. They sat him down. He never really regained his confidence. They shipped him out of there. Now he's in Miami, and he's a perfect one cut and go back. And they like what he's been doing. And I don't know if the Dolphins can afford to keep 4 backs, 5 if you count a fullback, on their roster. So if Slayton is the guy that they want to keep, they're going to have to keep 4 running backs, because I don't think you can afford to cut Lamar Miller and think that he's going to make your practice squad. Somebody's going to snatch him up. So that's interesting to keep an eye on, because if Lamar Miller is the guy they go with, you can afford to cut Steve Slayton and go with 3 backs and not worry about it. Let's go on into the rookie watch. Now, the rookie watch is simple. First round pick, Ryan Tannehill, a guy that they feel like is going to be the future for their quarterback position. So we've already talked about him extensively. Their second round pick is a plug and play tackle that they got from Stanford. Jonathan Martin is a guy that they're going to put in at that right tackle position opposite Jake Long. And they're going to tell him, it's your position, man this position up for the next 10 years for us. They're quietly bringing together a core nucleus of young guys that if Martin pans out, you have Jake Long at left tackle. You have Pouncey at center, who's looking like he's going to be a perennial Pro Bowl center for the next 10 years. And then you get Jonathan Martin over at right tackle. You could have linchpins at the 3 main positions on your offensive line. So the Dolphins think that he's going to be a guy that's going to solidify that right tackle position. The third round selection, and they had 2 of them, the first of which was spent on defensive end Olivier Vernon out of Miami. This is a guy that's going to provide depth for them at the defensive end spot. They like him a lot. He's kind of undersized, but he gets under the pads of offensive linemen, pushes them back into the quarterback. He's quick. He can get around the corner. They like this guy a lot. Look for him to be somebody that produces for them in the 2012 season. The second third round pick was Martin Agnew, the tight end out of Missouri. This guy is a pass-catching tight end. He's converted from wide receiver in college, and so he's still a little raw at the tight end position. He can run routes. He can catch the football. He is a mismatch nightmare for linebackers and safeties. They're going to look to get him in the game in passing situations and take advantage of his athleticism and his size and his ability to get open. His problem, if he wants consistent time on the field, he's going to have to become a better blocker. They're going to work with him on that, but it's going to be a while before they're going to be able to trust him to put him on the field and stand up at the point of attack against defensive linemen and linebackers. The fourth round selection that the Dolphins had, we talked about it, Lamar Miller, a guy they drafted out of Miami, they thought was going to be able to come in and contend for the second running back job. He's in a fight of his life for the third running back job. So we're going to see what Lamar Miller can bring to the table for the Dolphins in 2012 if he, in fact, makes the team. He should make the team. I feel dumb for even questioning whether he makes the team, but he's had a lackluster camp, and I don't think they're going to be able to stash him on the practice squad. So unless they have the idea of keeping 4 backs, it's going to be interesting to see what they do with that third running back position. So let's go on to the experiment. And we dubbed it, or I dubbed it, the fins. All right, the experiment is the fins. And let's get into the research question, which is, with the change in philosophy and turnover at various positions, can the Dolphins bypass the transitional stage and be relevant players in the AFC East? There's a lot going on in Miami right now. New offensive coordinator, new head coach, new quarterback potentially. A lot of pieces are flying around. Like I said, when you get a new coach, you get a new philosophy. He wants to bring in his guys. He wants to put his imprint on the franchise. And so the Dolphins are going to be a team that is going to be going through a transitional period. They look to buck that transitional period, bypass it, and look to play good football and give themselves a chance to sneak in the playoffs as a wild card. I don't know if continuity on the fly is going to get it done. I think they're going to need time together to get it done. Who knows? We will see. Hypothesis. If the Dolphins can get steady production out of their QB, whoever that may be, I hope that ends up being Matt Moore. I think it's going to end up being David Garrard. Then, and augment that offense with a stellar, explosive run game. Reggie Bush has been talking about leading the league in rushing yards. I don't know if that's feasible for him, but what they need him to do is do a lot of what he did last year, and that's give them explosive plays in the run game. He topped 1,000 yards for the first time in his career, and I don't see why he can't duplicate that. The line is going to be better this year, except for that right guard position. If they can get Reggie Bush and Daniel Thomas, a guy that they were disappointed in, that they drafted in the second round a few years ago, if he can step up and be that complimentary back to Reggie Bush, they get some out of that third back. Who knows, the Dolphins' running game can augment that passing game and be explosive and be something that the Dolphins can lean on. If they can do that, force more turnovers on defense while staying consistent on defense, then the Dolphins might have a chance in that AFC East. Who knows? Again, stranger things have happened. Materials needed for the Dolphins to not be bottom feeders or not be that team that is a doormat in the AFC East. QB production / leadership. Whoever wins that quarterback job needs to be a leader on the field. They need to be productive for the Dolphins to win anything. The running game needs to be elite. This quarterback, whoever it is, needs the running game to be successful. And they don't just need an average running game. They need this running game to be one that they can rely on and lean on heavily. If they can do that, then the Dolphins can use that running game, play action fake, go to Chad Johnson, go to Devon Best, go to these tight ends up the seam, and potentially cause mismatches in the secondary. Great coaching. This is Joe Philbin's first job as a head coach in the National Football League. They snatched him off of the Packers coaching staff, and he had to come in and do a great job of mixing it up, his play calls, and finding out what the pulse of this team is, finding out what buttons to press and how to get this team motivated and getting them to play their best football. Consistent production from the offensive line and the defense, and forcing more turnovers. The Dolphins have to get consistent production out of that defense because they rely on that defense a lot. That defense holds teams down in terms of scoring points and allows the offense to matriculate the ball down the field and stay in the game while kicking field goals. The Dolphins' defense is important to what this Dolphins team can do overall because the defense keeps the Dolphins in the game so that they have a chance to win in the fourth quarter. That offensive line has to be better this year. They have to protect the quarterback and they have to help open holes for that running game. And the Dolphins have to get more turnovers. I can't state that enough. The NFL is a turnover-laden league. You have to get turnovers. get short fields for your offense, win the turnover battle in order to win football games. The Dolphins have to do that. Let's get into the data. David Garrard, I essentially made him the starter because I think he's going to be the guy that wins the job. And if the Dolphins are going to do anything this year, they can't flip-flop at the quarterback position. Whoever wins the job is going to be the guy that takes over from week 1 and goes all the way through to week 17. They can't have guys in and out of the lineup if they're going to be successful. So I have David Garrard down, and I think he needs to have about 3,400 passing yards, 20 to 23 TDs, 13 to 15 interceptions, and a 63% completion percentage. Chad Johnson is a guy that I've talked to people about, and they think that he's done. And I tell them, Chad Johnson is not finished. There's a lot left in that tank. What people misunderstand about Chad Johnson is that he's a guy that brings attention to himself. He's never been a guy that tears apart a locker room a la Terrell Owens, or people like to talk about Randy Moss, who I don't think has been that big of a divisive guy in locker rooms. Chad Johnson is a football player. If you watched Hard Knocks, in that little discussion that he had with Joe Philbin, he said to him, and I believe him, he is sincere when he says, "This is my life, coach." He loves football. All those antics aside, Chad Johnson is a football player at heart. You can't question his ability to make plays on the field. You can't question his work ethic. No one's going to outwork Chad Johnson on the football field. He's going to give you everything he's got while he's out there, and he's going to talk trash while doing it. That's who he is. But Chad Johnson is going to show people in 2012 that there's a lot left in that gas tank. And you heard it here first. Chad Johnson will produce for the Miami Dolphins this year, no matter who is throwing him the football. So Chad Johnson will have 69 to 76 catches for 875 to 950 yards. And that number could increase if the quarterback play and the offensive line are consistent, with 7 to 9 touchdown passes. Devon Best is an interesting guy. You look at him, and he's in the mold of like a Wes Welker. These are the type of guys you don't want the New England Patriots to get their hands on. Him, Danny Amendola, these guys who are small and shifty can get in and out of their breaks quickly and don't drop the football. Devon Best is a guy that consistently can be counted on to make plays. 3rd and 7, you go to Devon Best. He'll get you 8 yards. 3rd and 11, Devon Best will get you 13 yards. 3rd and 5, Devon Best will get you 7 yards. He's that type of guy. He moves the sticks. He's a guy that you can count on. Look for 68 to 61 catches for 750 receiving yards, 4 to 6 touchdowns. Reggie Bush is the guy that has to step up, and I thought he did a great job last year. 200 to 225 carries for 1,085 to 1,150 rushing yards and about 11 total TDs. I think that's not out of the realm of possibility for Reggie. Last year he had 1,085 rushing yards, so he can get back there again, maybe even exceed that. If Reggie Bush is consistent within this offense, the Dolphins can score points this year and give themselves a chance to win ball games. And you never know. You stockpile the wins, sort them out at the end, and you see where you end up when the wild card is being discussed. Tight end position. The Dolphins don't have a dominant tight end. They don't have a tight end where you're like, this is tight end A. You have to stop this guy. They have a plethora of tight ends, each unique in his own way. They're all going to combine to be productive for the Dolphins in 2012. So I'm looking for 65 to 70 catches for about 650 to 825 yards and about 8 total touchdowns in 2012. The Dolphins defense has to force more turnovers. You can't just force 19 turnovers in 16 games. That's one turnover basically per game. That's not going to get it done in the NFL. The Dolphins need to force about 29 to 32 turnovers. And that's still not that much, but they have to take baby steps. They have to be much better than that. If they can get to 30, you'll be happy with that if you're a Dolphins fan. 39 to 42 sacks. The Dolphins will get there. Their defensive line puts pressure on the quarterback. They get to the quarterback. They get sacks. They will reach that number. 18.7 points a game is extremely low in the National Football League, but the Dolphins can do it. They only gave up 19.6 points last year. And with this defense getting better, another year under their defensive coordinator's belt, I don't see why these guys can't get pressure on the quarterback, force more turnovers, and lower that number down to a nice dental floss thin 18.7. If they can hold teams to 18 points, the Dolphins will be in a lot of football games. And scary teams are the ones that play sound defense, don't beat themselves, and give themselves a chance to win games. And that's exactly what the Dolphins can be in 2012. Independent variable. The Dolphins simply don't force or generate enough turnovers. I've talked about it at length. They got to generate more turnovers, shorten the field for their offense, and make plays. You can't go games without forcing turnovers or just having one. You got to force turnovers in this league to win ball games. If they can do that, the dependent variable, which will be the Dolphins, will score more points on offense. This team can score points if they get shorter fields. It's not a dynamic offense. They're not going to wow you with what they do on the offensive end. That's why they brought in Joe Philbin, an offensive-minded coach who's looking to boost that offense and give them more production. I don't know if you're going to get that right away because these pieces have to gel together, especially if you're going to switch quarterbacks. They need to get shorter fields to increase their chances to score points. I think that's important, and they need to get turnovers. If they can get turnovers, they can give the Dolphins a better opportunity to score points. And they have a great field goal kicker. If you can shorten fields, even if you only get a first down or two after the turnover, Dan Carpenter had an 85.8% field goal percentage last year. He doesn't miss a lot. And I think one of the most important stats for a field goal kicker is what you do between 40 and 49 yards. Dan Carpenter was 11 for 12 from 40 to 49 yards. That means he was money from the money distance in the NFL. So getting turnovers will put more points on the board for the Miami Dolphins offense, give them a better chance to win. Constant. For the most part, like I said, the Dolphins aren't going to wow you. That's not what they do. That's not their strength. They're going to come out and they're going to stay close. They're going to be consistent. They're going to give themselves a chance to win. And this team is going to go as the defense goes. And so if this defense can continue to be consistent, which they've been over the last few years, if they can continue to hold teams down from scoring, then the Dolphins will be in a position to possibly contend for a wild card spot. That is the constant for the Dolphins, is that defense. Conclusion. The Dolphins are in a transitional period. There's no other way to say it. You're not going to just come in. It's rare to have a new coach come in, implement his scheme, bring in his type of guy to run his system, and think that you're not going to take a step back. The Dolphins ended the season last year playing pretty good football. They were able to get themselves out of the cellar, which they had been in for the most part in 2012. They were able to leapfrog the Bills and finish third in the division. But I just can't see the Dolphins taking that next step this year. You have to take a step back when you get a new staff and you get a lot of new personnel coming in. They're changing philosophies. They're no longer that team that wants to come in and smack you in the mouth on offense. They're no longer a team that's going to pound the rock and try to keep the game close. Joe Philbin wants to come in and he wants to put points on the board. And I think that throughout this transitional period, they're going to have their ups and downs, and they're going to take a lot of lumps this year and learning how to grow together as a cohesive unit, that being coach and players alike. And I have that amounting to a 6-10 season for the Dolphins. That's going to put them at the basement in the AFC East. And they're going to be entertaining on Hard Knocks, but they're not going to be where they want to be on the football field this year. And that's going to do it for the Dolphins on their lab report. That's going to be a touchdown for this episode. I want to finish up with this extra point. We need the real referees back. Earlier on one of my episodes, I said that the replacement referees were going to be suffice. I was wrong. I went back and I watched that Hall of Fame game. There were some egregious calls and non-calls in that game, in addition to the things that I spoke to earlier. I saw one play in particular that the real referees, they never miss this. When guys land in the end zone when trying to stop a punt, the real officials, they never miss these calls. This guy was on the goal line, halfway in the end zone, when he had contact with the football, and they gave the Cardinals that stop and put the Saints on the 1 yard line. And you can't have blunders like that. If I'm a coach, I don't want to have to use a challenge on something that you should be able to see clearly on the field. We need the real officials back. I don't know what's going on in the league office and what the problem is and what's the hang up, but they need to get together and figure this thing out. Get the real officials back out there on the field so that the product on the field is the best that the NFL can offer. And with that note, that is going to be an episode. I'm your host, Lou. I'm signing off. Don't forget to drop me something in the inbox in the lab room at gmail.com. Also, you can look me up on Twitter, Facebook, same thing, in the lab room on Facebook. That's the Twitter handle. On Facebook as well, same thing. You've been watching In the Lab Room. I'll see you again tomorrow. Have a good one.